Hello again, this is Talking Hands with another video about Alita, but this one will go into much more than simply Alita. First, just a quick update. Alita is now hovering just around 401 or 402 million according to Box Office Mojo. It's great that it's reached the $400 million mark, but we need to keep supporting the movie if we want James Cameron to make a sequel to it. If it's still playing at your local theaters, take a friend who hasn't seen it to watch the film, or just see it for yourself if nobody wants to go. I just came back from my 7th viewing. And when the movie comes out in Blu-ray, buy a few extra copies to give to your friends. I plan on purchasing a steelbook or whatever is the most collectible version for myself and a few normal Blu-rays to give to others. So, I know I'll likely get a lot of dislikes for this video because it doesn't really fall in line with the views of either side, but just keep in mind that I'm only talking about why I feel this way. I'm not saying that if you feel any differently that you're wrong or whatever. We all have the freedom to have our own opinions, and this simply is mine. The topic of today's video is why you don't really see me going all in on this whole Alita versus Captain Marvel thing like you see so many other YouTubers who support Alita doing. Sure, there's some evidence that Disney and Marvel has played the system to maximize positive coverage of their film, but that's expected from a large movie studio. But a lot of people are mainly doing it because of the whole political controversy behind Captain Marvel's Brie Larson. Sure, I agree that I'm against all of this ridiculous identity politics that the left pushes so much, but let's be honest, most of Hollywood share the same mindset. It's very rare to find someone with more conservative political views in Hollywood. They do exist, but it's much harder to find. So why get so upset when another Hollywood celebrity exposes that side to us? When I come to the movies and pay to sit through a film, I will either enjoy it or not based on the merits of the film. And while I can say that I didn't quite enjoy Captain Marvel, it wasn't because of her comments or any competition with the leader or anything like that. For a little background, my views on feminism and movies are kind of a mixed bag in that while I really dislike modern feminism where all men are evil and everything men say and do can be considered rape and anything that can be considered masculine is called toxic, etc. I do find myself kind of feminist when it comes to my preference in movies. I do actually find I enjoy watching a strong female protagonist a little more than a male, but not if it's done in a really unnatural or antagonistic way. Like, for example, my all-time favorite movie is Terminator 2. And movies like Aliens, Die Hard, Predator, Frequency, Clear and Present Danger, True Lies make up a good portion of my top 10 movies of all time. Notice that out of all of them, there are plenty that have a male protagonist or several male protagonists such as Die Hard, Predator, Frequency, and Clear and Present Danger, but then also notice that Terminator 2, while it's considered an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, many would argue that the real star of the film is Linda Hamilton, who plays Sarah Connor, or at the very least it is shared between the two of them. And then there's Aliens, which basically is dominated by Sigourney Weaver, who plays Ellen Ripley. True Lies, I would say, is mainly Arnold, but it's also shared with Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays his wife. So you see that I'm pretty fair to both sides. I only say that I kind of prefer women because when it's done right, it's nice to see something different, and come on, I'm a straight male. I definitely prefer to watch a woman for 2 hours than a man. But again, it has to be done right. Some of these women power movies where some really unconvincing badass woman just goes around beating up men for no reason for 2 hours, those are just terrible. They're absolutely terrible. That is not at all what I mean when I say those things. With Captain Marvel, my main issue with that movie is that Brie Larson is extremely flat and wooden in a role. It was almost like she wasn't really that excited to play that character. There were some moments in the film where it could have been really emotional had she put more emotion into it. Like, there was a scene where someone is dying that she respected and cared about, and she just had this like, oh well, look at her face. Like, really? What a missed opportunity that was. And another where she is reunited with an old friend, and again, just with a blank look on her face. And then another where she realized she's been betrayed, and again, no real emotion from her. You know, the actress who plays Maria Rambeau, Lashana Lynch, I feel is so much better. In fact, for a movie being praised by the so-called progressives for its message of diversity, I'm surprised none of them have said a peep about them skipping the actual first human Captain Marvel, who was Monica Rambeau in the comics, a black woman, in favor of Carol Danvers, a white woman, who in the comics didn't acquire the powers to make her Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel until much later, like 4 or 5 others have acquired the powers and title. So essentially they whitewashed the character, not Carol Danvers since she was always white, but Captain Marvel. In my opinion, had they cast Lashana Lynch to play Monica Rambeau, who acquires the powers from Marvel, who was an alien, which is why I said Monica Rambeau was the first human Captain Marvel. That would have been so much better in my opinion, especially now that we see how little effort Brie Larson is putting into the role. But in terms of the whole identity politics of the movie, yes, there are some examples of that in the movie, and yes, they are eye-rollingly bad. For example, one scene from her flashback have her in a military obstacle course, and while she's climbing one of the ropes, you hear men in the background talking trash about how women are not strong enough, blah 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 blah. Like really? In a real military obstacle course, regardless of gender, all you hear from the others are words of encouragement. That was just completely unrealistic. You know, we were all part of the same military, nobody heckles another service member during the obstacle courses. It just doesn't happen. Then you see another example of that where she's in a bar and a male airman walks up to her and makes a stupid comment about how there's a reason why they call it a cockpit. Like, please, again? Like, this is only something that happens in these women empowerment movies. Then it happens again when some guy on a motorcycle randomly makes some disparaging comments against her. I don't even remember what it is, but seriously, most people just ignore strangers they don't know. You know, or if they will say something unprovoked, it would most likely just be some generic greeting. But of course, since they were trying to put the whole feminism message in a movie, every guy has to be portrayed to be some asshole. And of course, there was a fight scene where they played I'm Just a Girl in the background, like totally cheesy. So yes, the identity politics squeezed into the film is definitely bad and definitely didn't have a place in the movie, but honestly, if the rest of the movie was entertaining, I would have, left the theater entertained anyway. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie was just full of plot holes and created plot holes for other films and Brie Larson's wooden acting. Then we get the exact opposite problem with Samuel L. Jackson, who was extremely charismatic in this movie, but maybe too much so. I mean, the Nick Fury we've grown to know from other films is kind of grumpy, I mean, let's face it. Yet, in this movie, he seems so upbeat and so optimistic about everything. It just really just seemed out of character. Also, how he reacts to actually losing his eye, it's just completely bonkers on how bad it was. It was just like, ow, oh well, I lost my eye. I mean, he didn't actually say that, but that's just how it seemed. The rest of the cast were all pretty decent and serviceable. Ben Mendelsohn was a good one. The movie had some fairly okay action scenes, but nothing really special. The cat was what I was most looking forward to, but too much of him was obviously CGI, which kind of took away from it. But overall, it was an entertaining film, not really great, but not the worst movie either. I think a lot of people are either heaping praise onto the movie or completely dumping on it simply based on their political views. While in my opinion, the movie is just right in between, where it's not really a bad film, but it's not a memorable film either. But that's the thing about my opinion. I don't find that I really fully agree with anyone when it comes to these. I watch a lot of videos on Alita because I love the movie, but then there are always those awkward moments when, some people will bring up something that I really just don't think is a big deal or worth mentioning. Here's where I'm pretty sure if you haven't already downvoted this video, you will probably be tempted to downvote me now. But just keep in mind that this is simply my opinion and I'm in no way claiming that you were wrong if you have a different opinion or that my view is more valid or not. Also keep in mind that I do tend to enjoy female protagonists more than male ones, so maybe I'm just giving more benefit of the doubt than most people. But I really don't get the whole hate against the new Star Wars movies. Particularly the whole hating on Rey thing. In terms of other aspects of that people don't like about them, I won't really get into that because we all have our opinions, and I have some things I don't like either, and then other things that I did like. But in terms of Rey, I just simply disagree with a lot of the criticism her character has gotten. One term that gets the quick draw really often now is Mary Sue, in that she's more powerful than a character should be simply because she's the main character. I mean, honestly, almost every movie protagonist suffers from this on some degree, but I guess people are saying that she's a pretty major one. Now let's compare and contrast with a character people say is definitely not a Mary Sue, Luke Skywalker. Now, somehow Rey knowing how to fight is unrealistic, but Luke Skywalker knowing how to fight isn't. So let's break it down here and why I personally have a different view on it. So Luke Skywalker grew up on a moisture farm on Tatooine with his uncle and his aunt. Literally prior to the events of A New Hope, he lived like any typical teenager did in a rural area. Rey, on the other hand, was sold into slavery as a child and ended up growing up alone in a hostile planet where I'm pretty sure it isn't a stretch to say that cute girls like Rey are likely to be victimized at a disproportionately high rate. So, thinking about it that way, knowing that she has survived so long alone, fending for herself, and the fact that she literally carries a weapon around with her at all times when we are first introduced to her character, which character would have gotten into more fights prior to their introductions in the movie? Which character is more likely to have learned how to fight? In my opinion, again, just my opinion, the girl who has survived alone on a hostile planet, carrying around a weapon at all times, is more likely to actually know how to fight than a moisture farmer growing up with his uncle and aunt. Now, many will argue that he receives training. I'm not talking about who he becomes in Return of the Jedi. By that time, there's assumed to have been a bit of a time jump between Empire Strikes Back and that film. I'm talking only about A New Hope. Even before he meets Yoda, he's already fighting back against stormtroopers and getting in all kinds of conflicts and fights. But nobody seems to have a problem with that. I mean, stormtroopers are supposed to be trained military personnel, yet they seem to be no match against some kid from a moisture farm who probably only first touched that kind of a blaster when we see him dressed up as a stormtrooper. Then even after he meets Yoda, he trains for what, like maybe a few days, a week? You know, it can't be too much time because they show him training alongside the events Han and his group is experiencing up until they are captured, at which point Luke leaves Yoda and goes to help them. But yet he's almost able to go toe-to-toe with Darth Vader. I mean, sure, Darth Vader ends up defeating him, and he is definitely pulling his punches, but there are times where Luke seems to gain the upper hand where he really shouldn't have. When it comes to the new Star Wars movies, the main character that I find to know more than he should isn't Rey, but Finn. I mean, he was a regular stormtrooper. There really was no reason for him to know how to use any kind of a melee weapon that he uses in the movie with any kind of proficiency. But anyway, my point is not to say that Luke Skywalker is a Mary Sue, but that it's all part of the unbelievability every action sci-fi movie will have with the protagonist, and I don't think it's anything worse with Rey when compared with many other characters. I just personally never got bothered with it, and I honestly don't mind seeing her. And again, this is just my opinion, not saying that you're wrong if you're one of the ones who dislike a character. You know, you have your reasons and I have mine, which is the great thing about opinions. With Alita, I just find that it's counterproductive to immediately start throwing comparisons with other movies such as Captain Marvel, especially if we're trying to convince the studios and to convince James Cameron to push for a sequel. We need to show them that we love Alita on its own, and it doesn't have to be compared with anything else. And I feel like some of this us versus them attitude could have cost Alita some revenue as well. Since so many of the public want to watch anything to do with the MCU now, by making it seem like they are polar opposites, some people who might have wanted to watch both would have ended up just watching Captain Marvel with all this controversy, since, you know, it was made to seem like they had to choose one or the other. And you see other YouTubers complaining now that there are articles popping up everywhere about how only trolls or anti-women love Alita. I'm sorry, but this is the fault of some Alita fans, not the fault of the journalists. You know, unfortunately, whether or not you agree with it, Captain Marvel is currently deemed what you should support if you support women. And then it seems like most of the YouTubers I see covering Alita cannot even mention Alita without talking about how much they hate Captain Marvel. So what they see is that every positive thing said about Alita is only said by prefacing it with how much that person is against the poster movie for feminism. And then we wonder why journalists think that only anti-Captain Marvel trolls love Alita. I absolutely loved Alita, again. Saw it for the 7th time today. But it has absolutely nothing to do with Captain Marvel. And I so happen to have not really liked Captain Marvel too much, but it has nothing to do with Alita. And it has nothing to do with any of the whole political dispute over the movie. Sure, there were political decisions that I didn't like in the movie, but I tried to watch it objectively and simply didn't enjoy Brie Larson's performance or the portrayal of some of the characters, and that ultimately sealed my opinion about the movie. Anyway, again, this is just my opinion. I apologize if some of you may disagree with me, but it's how I honestly feel. If you agree or disagree, please feel free to explain below in the comments. I like reading them, and I do try to reply to as many as I could. And remember, when Alita comes out on Blu-ray, buy a few copies for friends as well. Make it a success on home video. Thank you for watching.